So what was the transition like going from, massive shows like Entourage, How to Make It in America, and then you another huge hit, Ballers, and that how did you find that transitioning from those shows, like, was it a fun creative process? Was it like how did it feel?
You mean from one to the next? Because there's two transitions we could talk about.
Okay.
We could talk about the transition of working for pretty much, let's say, '04 through 15 straight years, basically. A good 15-year run from Entourage, How to Make It in America to Ballers to the transition of nothing,
Yeah.
right? Which
Yeah,
is a
yeah.
very
Ooh.
interesting
Yeah,
experience.
yeah.
Or we could talk about how to switch gears between projects. I always had multiple projects. So before Ballers, I was writing this Hell's Angel movie about Sonny Barger. Before, I think around the time I had to make it in America, I was still on Entourage when we developed that, but I've been developing a bunch of different stuff, and that just happened to that was one that was moving forward. So those transitions, I think, are easier because you're in it.
Right.
Steve Levinson created Ballers. He did all him and Mark did the grime work with that and got Dwayne involved. That was more like I was invited to come on pre-pilot for a writer's room, which was going to be for a few months over a summer to break season one so that if HBO was interested in, I'm not even sure if they'd committed to the pilot at that time, to be
Oh,
honest with
wow.
you. If they were interested in making the pilot, that they could tell them what season one would look like. Or if they made the pilot liked it, we could give them this is what season one would look like. So maybe that's what the plan was. We'd have to ask Lev. But I went on to it, as Steve's guy with Steve. Evan Riley, who's going to run that show, brought his buddy Steve Charlotte, and the four of us got in a room, and we kind of like in just like a handful of weeks managed to figure out a whole season of television, right? Which is kind of what we're doing now on the show that we're out with. That people are like, oh, what does the season look like? You kind of got to be fully stacked, you know, in terms of your vision for what it looks like when you go to sell it, because
Even with the pilot, right? Even with just the
yeah, I
pilot.
think like listen, if they were like, hey, we love it, we'll shoot a pilot. I don't think anybody'd shoot a pilot anymore unless
Yeah.
they knew, that you knew what the season was going to be and could walk them through it. Information and the granular nature of it has gotten so paramount for people to fully see the vision and understand it. So at that time we did that, and then the opportunity just came, like, because I said I'd come on for just these few weeks or months or whatever it was gonna be, and then they were like, well, you could stay on, be an EP, do this, do that, and then the opportunity was good, and I think
Yeah.
I had a kid on the way at that time, so I was like, fuck it, let's do it. But that one's more of a Steve thing, whereas I feel like How to Make It in America, I drove that substantially more than I drove Ballers, and in part that was part of my life experience. It was started by Ian, that process, Edelman, on a show he had sold to HBO, but it was slightly different conceptually. So
See, I think that's interesting to hear too, as like, a fan of all the shows. It's kind of like there's different, even though it's a similar group, it can be different on maybe who brought it or, the
yeah,
writer's room makeup, right? It's
yeah,
pretty
of
interesting
course.
to hear.
Well, there's certain things that play to people's strengths. I think that, like, I've never been in a band. Lorenzo has. I don't make music, but I think that people have lanes, but there's something special when certain people work together,
Yeah.
and they click in a certain way, And certainly I felt like we did that on Entourage. I felt like me and Doug knew each other, for a long time. We have a lot of similar tastes in things, or we might find the same things kind of funny, and that might be to a degree cultural and environmental. Just being a couple like Long Island Jewish kids, like there are certain things we're gonna share,
Hmm.
from the same generation in that area in that time that we grew up. But I think that You know, sometimes somebody brings 80 to the table and you bring 20. Sometimes you got the vision, you bring 70, they bring 30. So it's like, I would imagine it's like a man, you know,
Yeah.
with all the dysfunction and all the
Yeah.
fucking ego and craziness, you know?
Yeah, like, you look at the Beatles, it's like Lennon would write a song, then
Yeah.
George would write a song,
They
Paul,
were
you
all
know?
talented, man,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? So the Beatles, you know?
Hell
It's
yeah.
ingredients, man. You
Yeah.
need certain ingredients to make the sauce.
Yep. Well, I appreciate the incredible answer for my shitty question.
It wasn't shitty, you know? And
Yeah,
as for the
fuck it,
transition of coming out to nothingness, that was a bigger pill for me to swallow, I think. You know, Ballers might not have had the zeitgeist impact that something like Entourage did, but it had a huge fucking audience
Oh, yeah.
for HBO. And I mean, Dwayne at the time also probably one of the top movie stars in the world, you know?
You for
And
sure.
yeah, and you go, oh shit, like I wrote a large portion of it. I directed a bunch of them, EP'd it. You like, I felt rewards on being a part of that show that I hadn't felt on Entourage and How to Make It in America. And the only reason I could think to justify that feeling is that it was a more complete experience for me, right? Like I'm writing and I'm directing and producing and I'm doing more things, so I feel more ownership in a finished episode, right? I'm thinking
Yeah.
that's what it is. I still don't know for a fact. I love the cast. There's so many things I loved about the experience of working on Ballers, but when Ballers ended, I'm just gonna make another show, you know, because you get fucking spoiled, right? Like you get like, hey, I go to work. This is what I do, you know. You do what you do. You do what you do. I do what I do. I get to make TV shows. And then like, no, you know, we're going to shut down for this pandemic, you know? And then you come out of the pandemic and then maybe the kind of stuff I do or like to be a part of isn't super popular right now. Maybe there's some other things at work culturally, right? And they don't want to do that kind of stuff. Or maybe they're like, these are the guys who did Entourage. Remember Entourage? What that was? So now you're just sitting there, you're like, holy fuck. Like, I just want to go create, man. Like, I want to go work and I want to make cool shit. And, you know, I guess you do what I did, which was just continue to try to do that. And it's what I'll always do is just be persistent. But, you know, those transitions to me of not working, coming from work, hey, look, man, I could get a series picked up and then I got to go back to work. That might be the toughest transition of all. I have no idea. I got used to spending 4 hours a day at Equinox, you know? I might be like, you know, like, what do you mean? I don't get to go to Equinox for 4 hours this morning? I got to be on set? Like, that could be a tricky transition too. I guess like how we navigate life, all these transitions.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to drop a like if you enjoyed the video.
And subscribe and hit the bell for a whole lot more to come.